The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday. I was about to shut down my computer when the notification popped up. Subject, you need to see this. The sender was Jason, one of the junior analysts I've been mentoring for the past few years. It was odd to get something from him so late, but I opened it anyway. Rebecca, sorry to send this, but you deserve to know. I recorded it at the year-end party. Thomas was drunk and chatting with some managers in the corner of the room. You should watch it. I clicked on the attached video and cranked up the volume. The footage showed Thomas Wilson, my boss for 20 years, surrounded by other executives, holding a glass of whiskey, and that same smile he always wore when he felt superior to someone. Rebecca, that woman is completely useless. 2 months ago, she lost track of the Hendricks account, and I still had to fix her mess. I've already scheduled it with HR. Next month, she's out. My stomach sank. I paused the video, unable to watch any further. 20 years. 20 years of delivering results, sacrificing weekends, covering for his mistakes, building relationships with clients. 20 years of loyalty reduced to completely useless. The Hendricks account. It was him who insisted on that aggressive approach that scared the client away. I had warned, documented my position, but I backed down when he ordered me to go ahead. And now this? I took a deep breath and kept watching. That's a tough decision, Thomas, one of the other executives said. Rebecca's been here since the beginning. Tough? She's just another cog in the machine. Scott already approved the cost cut. I'm just waiting to close this quarter. I'll use the restructuring to get rid of her. I shut my laptop. I didn't need to see anymore. Tears welled up, but something stronger was growing inside of me. A month. He was going to have 1 month. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. The next morning, the shock had turned into determination. I walked into the office with a rehearsed smile and greeted Thomas like I always did. Good morning, Rebecca. How was your weekend? He asked with that fake cordiality. Productive, I replied. I was going over the Westfield numbers. Great! We need them spot on for the board meeting. They always are. Over the following weeks, I worked harder than ever. I arrived earlier, left later. But while everyone saw just the same old Rebecca, my lunches turned into discreet meetings. I created a new personal email and started making strategic copies of presentations, reports, and client analyses. Nothing confidential, just my own work. At night, I studied Sterling and Company, Carter and Phillips's main rival. I analyzed their weaknesses, their offers, their culture. I found Michael Pierce, the CEO, on LinkedIn and sent him a carefully crafted message. I'd like to discuss potential opportunities together. Why don't we grab a coffee next week? He replied 2 days later. At the same time, I began reaching out to clients with whom I had built relationships over the years. Discreet calls, informal meetings, always under the guise of a preventive check-in. William Miller, CEO of Miller Technologies, our biggest client, invited me to lunch after one of those calls. Rebecca, you seem different. Is everything okay at C&P? He asked while we ate. Let's just say I'm rethinking my future, William. Interesting. You know I've always valued your work, right? Thomas was lucky to have you for so long. Thanks for saying that. I purposely paused. William, can I trust you with an honest conversation? His interest was immediate. On the first Monday of the following month, Amanda from HR called me at 8:30 a.m. Rebecca, Thomas would like to see you in his office at 9. I'll be there too. I was expecting this. I put on my best outfit, had stored my personal belongings in my bag the previous week, and I discreetly emptied my drawer. I deleted all my personal emails and reset my corporate phone. I walked into Thomas's office and saw the folder with my termination documents on the table. Rebecca, please have a seat, Thomas said, with that expression of false concern. Amanda looked at the floor. As part of our organizational restructuring, we're making some strategic changes, he began, reciting the standard corporate spiel. After much consideration, we've decided to eliminate your position. I sat in silence, staring at him. Clearly, my silence bothered him. Your years of service are appreciated, of course, he continued uneasily. The severance package is generous, more than what's legally required. How much time do I have to clear out my desk? I asked calmly. Amanda intervened. We've prepared a box for you, if needed. We can escort you to your station right now. I won't need that. I placed my badge on the table. Everything's set. Thomas looked surprised. You already knew? Let's just say I've been pretty useful for 20 years, Thomas, including anticipating moves. As I left the building, I stopped by a nearby cafe. I opened up my personal laptop and carefully drafted an email to William Miller. I attached the video Jason had sent me. William, in our last conversation, I mentioned changes in my career. Today was my last day at Carter & Phillips. Before moving on, I felt that you, as a long-time valued partner, deserved to hear it from me, not through corporate announcements. For the past 3 years, I've been the one primarily responsible for your account, even though, officially, Thomas Wilson appears as the senior manager. Attached is something that might help clarify the current culture at the company. The video shows Thomas talking about other clients and employees, including me. I deeply value our partnership and mutual trust. If you'd like to discuss what this means for your current projects, feel free to reach out on my personal contact. Respectfully, Rebecca. I took a deep breath and hit send. The first domino was in place. Next, I called Michael Pierce. Michael, this is Rebecca. I'm officially available for that conversation we mentioned. Perfect timing, he replied. How about today at 4 p.m. at our office? I have a specific proposal to discuss. 3 days after my firing, in the executive suite at Sterling & Company, Michael Pierce was beaming. Rebecca, William Miller just got in touch with us. They're canceling their contract with Carter & Phillips. He mentioned your name 3 times during the call. I nodded, feigning surprise. Miller Technologies accounted for almost 22% of Carter & Phillips's annual revenue. He said no one had ever properly highlighted the risks of the last project, and now he understands why, Michael continued. Apparently Thomas Wilson had a part to play in that. That night I got a message from Jason. The office is in chaos. Thomas is yelling at everyone. Scott locked himself in the conference room with the finance department redoing projections. What did you do? I didn't reply, but I smiled, imagining the panic. The Miller account wasn't just big, it was strategic. Other clients were watching what Miller was doing. The next morning, Michael walked into my new office at Sterling. We just got an RFP from Hendricks Corporation. Isn't it the same one as? Yes, exactly that one. I know their needs inside out. I can have something ready by tomorrow. In the following days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Former clients curious about my sudden exit. Ex-colleagues seeking information about opportunities. Every conversation was an opportunity to direct more business away from Carter & Phillips. Within a week, 3 major clients had scheduled meetings with Sterling. Thomas had built an empire on my efforts for 2 decades. Now, I was dismantling its foundation, one piece at a time. My office at Sterling & Company was 3 times larger than the cubicle I'd spent the last 2 decades in. From the window, I could see the Carter & Phillips building across the street. Ironically, for years, I'd looked at that building wondering what it'd be like to work for the competition. Michael Pierce walked in without knocking, excited like a kid on Christmas morning. Rebecca, the preliminary results are extraordinary. In just 2 weeks, we've won over 4 accounts from CMP, including the Hendricks you mentioned. The Hendricks had been unhappy for months. Thomas insisted on a strategy I knew was doomed to fail. When I presented alternative projections, he ignored them and then blamed me for the outcome. Well, they loved your personalized approach. Their CFO called me personally to compliment it. I smiled and opened my laptop to show the presentation. I'd prepared. This is the proposal for Thompson Industries. They've been with CMP for 12 years, but their contract is up for renewal in 3 weeks. Michael scrutinized the slides, frowning. This level of detail about their needs, how did you pull it all together so quickly? I actually developed this proposal 6 months ago for CMP, but Thomas shelved it because he thought it wasn't worth the effort. Thompson only makes up 4% of their revenue, but they're a hugely influential client in the pharmaceutical sector. And you think we can win them over? I'm sure. I've already scheduled a meeting with Janet Thompson for tomorrow. She always preferred my approach over Thomas's. As Michael left, I got a message from Melissa, an ex-colleague from the financial analysis department. I just accepted a job offer from Sterling. I start in 2 weeks. 5 more people from my department are sending in resumes. The exodus had begun. It wasn't just about clients. The best talents were also leaving the ship. The next day, the meeting with Janet Thompson went better than I expected. Rebecca, we were shocked by your sudden departure. Thomas told us you quit to pursue other interests. Interesting, Thomas has a uniquely skewed view of reality. Well, it doesn't matter. We've always appreciated your work. In fact, it was unsettling when he showed up alone at the last quarterly meeting. His presentations just don't hold a candle to yours. Janet, Sterling is ready to offer special conditions to ease the transition. I know exactly what worked for you with CMP and what needed improvement. At the end of the meeting, Janet shook my hand firmly. Send over the contract. We want to formalize things before our current contract expires. Over the next month, I implemented what I internally called Operation Exodus. Every proposal sent to CNP's former clients was meticulously personalized, highlighting exactly the points I knew were important to them. Insights I'd gathered over the years that Thomas never bothered to learn. We hired 15 ex-employees from CNP, each bringing valuable relationships and institutional knowledge. Sterling grew while my old company bled talent and revenue simultaneously. Michael promoted me to Corporate Strategy Director, giving me an even bigger office and a dedicated team. You've transformed our company in just 1 month, he said during the announcement. That night, I looked again at the CNP building from the window. The lights in the executive floor were still on. Even though it was nearly midnight, I imagined Thomas and Scott desperately trying to figure out what was happening with their company. 6 weeks after my firing, a Wall Street Journal article appeared. Carter and Phillips faces client exodus as Sterling thrives. The reporter mentioned the suspicious transfer of key accounts and speculated about internal issues at CMP. Jason sent me a photo of the main meeting room. Posters with declining revenue graphs covered the walls. Scott is holding daily emergency. In meetings, Thomas is furious, blaming everyone but himself. That afternoon, Mark Davidson from Davidson Enterprises, who had been a CNP client for over a decade, walked into my office without an appointment. Rebecca, I'll get straight to it. I have a meeting with Thomas tomorrow to discuss our contract renewal. He called me personally, something he's never done before. I understand you're weighing your options, Mark. Actually, I've already made up my mind. I want to switch our services over to Sterling, but I need to know what's really going on. Half of our suppliers are making the same move. I opened a folder on my laptop. I've put together a comparative analysis between Sterling's services and those of CNP, tailored to your needs. As for the exodus of clients, let's just say many are discovering that CNP doesn't value their relationships as much as they should. Thomas mentioned that you were fired for unsatisfactory performance. I smiled calmly, rotating my monitor to show the video that Jason had sent me. I paused after Thomas said, "Completely useless." I believe that clears things up. I personally managed your account for 8 years, Mark. Thomas wouldn't even be able to name his top 3 products without referring to my notes. Mark nodded, impressed. I'll cancel tomorrow's meeting. My legal department will contact you to formalize the transition. As more clients migrated, CNP's problems deepened. Budget cuts were implemented. The quarterly bonus was suspended. Jason reported that an entire floor had been emptied to cut operating costs. The real blow came when the National Association of Business Consulting published its annual report. Sterling had jumped 5 spots in the rankings, while CNP had fallen 7. The explanation cited a significant realignment of clients in the market and leadership issues at CNP. The crisis hit a new level when, through contacts in the financial sector, I learned that CNP was negotiating emergency loans. In just 2 months, their market position had collapsed so dramatically that creditors were demanding additional collateral. Michael Pierce called an extraordinary board meeting to discuss our explosive growth. We need to immediately increase our operational Capacity, he announced. Rebecca brought in more business in 2 months than we've garnered in the last 2 years. We need the infrastructure to sustain this growth. I suggest we acquire the adjacent building, I replied. We have available capital after last quarter, and we'll need the space once the new contracts are fully implemented. After the meeting, Michael called me out for a drink at the rooftop bar. Rebecca, I'll be honest. When you first contacted me, I thought you were just after some insights about C&P, maybe a few small accounts. I never imagined this. He gestured to the city view. You essentially transferred half their market value to us. Thomas underestimated how much clients value genuine relationships. He thought they were loyal to the brand, to the logo. In reality, they're loyal to the people who care for them every day. People like you. Exactly. And now those people are here. My phone vibrated with an email notification. Bloomberg had published an exclusive piece. Investors at Carter and Phillips call emergency board meeting. Leadership changes expected. I showed Michael the news and he raised his glass. To the future, he toasted. To the future, I replied, knowing Thomas's downfall was imminent. The day of the Carter and Phillips board meeting dawned cloudy, with a looming storm, symbolically appropriate for what was about to happen. Jason sent me a message early in the morning. Board members are arriving. Thomas has been holed up in his office since 6 a.m. Looks like he didn't sleep. I decided to work as usual, as if it were just any other day. I analyzed proposals, attended meetings with new clients, and finalized the integration of another group of former C&P employees who had joined Sterling. Around 2 p.m., the notification I'd been waiting for popped up on my phone. An update from Bloomberg. Urgent. Thomas Wilson removed from Carter and Phillips presidency amid client crisis and stock downturn. I allowed myself a small smile. 20 years of loyalty tossed aside like I was just another cog in the machine. Now he was getting the same treatment. Minutes later, my phone rang. The caller was from C&P. Rebecca, it's Scott. Scott, what a surprise. I imagine you already know about Thomas. I've heard something. Straight to the point. They want me to step in temporarily while they search for a permanent replacement. We're bleeding clients and talent, and everyone knows where they're heading. Scott, is there a particular reason you're calling me? He sighed heavily. They want me to offer you your job back, with a promotion, of course. Director of Operations, reporting directly to me. Double your salary and an equity stake. I chuckled softly. Scott, do you really think I'd go back? That's what I told the board, but they insisted you should at least consider it. Rebecca, the truth is we're falling apart. We lost 9 of our 10 biggest clients. Half of the consulting department resigned. Our investors are in a panic. That sounds like a serious problem. You planned it all, didn't you, ever since you left? Let's just say I learned a lot about strategy during my 20 years there. It's a shame that Thomas never acknowledged that. He's a wreck, you know. Literally. The board escorted him out of the building. 25 years building the company ended in 8 weeks. Irony doesn't escape me, Scott. Later that day, the financial media exploded with analyses of Thomas Wilson's downfall. One particularly biting article mentioned how the departure of an unnamed senior executive had triggered a chain reaction of losses for the company. Jason sent me a photo of the office being emptied. Thomas is banned from returning to the building. They sent security to escort him while he gathered his things. That night, Michael Pierce organized a small celebration in the office. He opened a bottle of champagne and gathered the leadership team. To Rebecca, he toasted, who showed us that integrity and genuine relationships are still the true assets of any business. While everyone celebrated, I watched the rain through the window, thinking about how a 25-year career could unravel so quickly when built on arrogance and disdain. Thomas had called me completely useless. Now he was experiencing the true meaning of that word. Revenge was sweet, but the success we were building at Sterling was about to be even more satisfying. That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. 3 months after my departure from C&P, Sterling had established itself as the undisputed leader in the market. Our office now spanned 3 floors, with a 4th under renovation to accommodate continuous expansion. my new position as executive. Vice President reflected my contribution to this explosive growth. On an otherwise ordinary Wednesday, my assistant Sophia rushed into my office. "Rebecca, there's a man at reception insisting on seeing you. He didn't schedule an appointment and seems upset." "Who is it?" "Thomas Wilson." My heart raced for a moment, but I kept my composure. "Tell him to wait 15 minutes, then send him in." I used that time to tidy up my desk, check my appearance in my compact mirror, and mentally review where we were now. CNP had announced a massive restructuring the previous week, with rumors of a sale or merger. Their shares had dropped 68% since I left. When Thomas entered, I could hardly recognize him. The imposing, arrogant man who used to command rooms with. His presence now looked smaller and older. His expensive suit had been swapped for a set that clearly had seen better days. A stubble and deep bags under his eyes completed the transformation. "Rebecca," he said, his voice faltering slightly. "Thomas, what a surprise. Please, have a seat." He took in my office, 3 times larger than his CNP office, with a panoramic view of the city and exclusive designer furniture. "You really made it, didn't you? All this time I never noticed." "Noticed what exactly?" "Your potential, your worth." I kept a neutral expression, waiting for him to continue. "The last few months have been rough. The board fired me without warning. They froze my benefits while they investigate my management. The press has been ruthless. Business can be ruthless. Rebecca, I'll get to the point. I'm broke. My reputation is in tatters. No one in the industry is returning my calls." He took a deep breath. "Except you." "I didn't return your call, Thomas. You just showed up unannounced. You know what I mean. You're the only person who could help me now." I got up and walked over to the window, gazing at the CNP building in the distance. "Help how exactly?" "I need a job. Any position. Consulting, analysis, business development. I can work with clients you wouldn't want to handle. I've got 30 years of experience. And you spent 25 of those years treating me like disposable, Thomas." He looked down. "I made a terrible mistake. The worst of my life." "No, your mistake wasn't firing me. Your mistake was believing that people are just replaceable cogs, that loyalty doesn't matter, that respect is optional. I understand that now. Believe me, I learned it the hard way." I sat back down, studying the broken man before me. "You have a family, Thomas. Other connections. Why come to me?" "Because you understand the business better than anyone, because—" He hesitated. "Because you're the only one who can understand what it's like to lose everything you built. The difference is, I didn't lose. I rebuilt." Thomas leaned forward, desperate. "I'll do anything. Please, Rebecca, I'm begging you, just one opportunity." I considered for a moment, recalling 2 decades of small humiliations, credit taken by others, and opportunities denied. Then I remembered the video, his words echoing, "Completely useless." When you called me useless in that video, Thomas, you revealed your true character. It wasn't a momentary slip. It was the truth you always hid behind fake smiles and empty praise during evaluations. It was a terrible mistake. I was drunk, trying to impress. No, you were being honest for the first time. And now I'm being honest too. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "There's no place for you here, Thomas. There's no place for you in any company I have influence over. And right now that means pretty much the entire industry." He remained seated, stunned. "You'll have to rebuild your life somewhere else, just as I had to. The difference is you have resources I never had. Savings, contacts outside the industry. Use them." Thomas finally stood, defeated. "You orchestrated all this, didn't you? Every client that left, every employee who resigned. It was all meticulously planned. Let's just say I learned from a master of manipulation. Only I applied those lessons more effectively." As he reached the door, I added, "Thomas, one last thing. That Hendricks account you blamed me for losing. We closed a deal with them yesterday, the biggest in their history. After he left, I sat in silence for a few minutes, processing the encounter. I didn't feel the joy I expected, only a strange sense of closure. The cycle was complete. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. 6 months after my confrontation with Thomas, Sterling had firmly established itself as the most respected consulting firm in the market. We expanded into 2 new countries, opened an innovation center, and our market value tripled. Meanwhile, Carter & Phillips was acquired by a smaller conglomerate, its name kept only as an unremarkable subsidiary. On a sunny afternoon, Michael Pierce walked into my office with an enigmatic expression. "Rebecca, I have some news that might interest you. The board just informed me that I'm being promoted to chairman of the board." "Michael, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thanks, but that's not the main news." He beamed broadly. "They want you to take over as CEO." I was momentarily speechless, which is rare for me. The board was unanimous. "No one has transformed this company like you have. In less than a year, we've redefined the market, and everyone recognizes that it happened under your strategic leadership." I looked out the window at the city sprawling before me. Somehow the CNP building now seemed smaller, almost insignificant, in the urban landscape. "How long do I have to think about it?" I asked. "They'd like to announce it at next week's press conference. But between us, Rebecca, it would be madness to turn it down." After Michael left, I found myself mulling over the proposal. CEO. Me, who for 20 years was treated as disposable, was now set to lead one of the biggest companies in the industry. That night, I organized a small dinner at my new apartment. I invited Jason, who had become my right-hand person at Sterling, along with a few other ex-colleagues from CNP who had transitioned with me. "A toast," Jason proposed, raising his glass. "To Rebecca, who showed us that true value always finds its place. And to loyalty," I added, "which when rightly directed, builds empires." Later, alone on my terrace, I reflected on the past few months. Revenge was satisfying, sure, but I found that my true victory lay in the opportunity to build something new, a foundation based on the values I've always believed in: recognition, integrity, and respect. The next morning, I called Michael. "I accept the position, but on one condition." "And what would that be?" "I want to implement a mentoring program for employees at all levels. I want to ensure that talents are never wasted or underestimated like I was." "Consider it approved. Anything else?" "Yes. Our promotion policies need to be transparent. Real merit over office politics. Rebecca, you'll have full freedom to transform this company however you see fit." The following week, before the press conference, I received an unexpected email from William Miller, CEO of Miller Technologies, our first major client after leaving CNP. "Rebecca, I heard about your imminent promotion to CEO. No news in. The corporate world has made me prouder. You've transformed not only your own career, but also the way we do business with consultants. Integrity and competence finally being rewarded as they should be. Congratulations." As I prepared for the press conference, I dressed carefully, not in the conservative attire I used to wear at CNP, but in an elegant suit that reflected my new position and confidence. On stage, in front of journalists and market analysts, Michael introduced me as the visionary who redefined our company and the market. As I approached the microphone, I saw familiar faces in the crowd, clients who had followed me, colleagues who trusted my leadership, even some competitors, trying to figure out our secret to success. "I am deeply grateful for this opportunity," I began. "Just over a year ago, I learned a valuable lesson about resilience and worth. Today, I'm not just accepting a position, I'm embracing a mission to create a corporate culture where no one is ever considered disposable, where excellence is not only rewarded but nurtured." At that moment, I realized that my story had grown into something bigger than revenge. It was a story of renewal and rebuilding. Thomas's downfall was just one chapter, not the end. The real triumph was in what I would build from here. "The future of Sterling will be defined by one simple truth," I concluded. "The greatest asset of any company is not its patents, its processes, or even its clients. It's its people. And when you truly value that asset, there's no limit to what can be achieved." When I left the stage to applause, I knew I had completed a cycle. The Rebecca who was dismissed as useless no longer existed. In her place stood a leader who turned betrayal into triumph and who now had the chance to redefine what success meant, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. Revenge brought me here, but it was vision that would carry me forward. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this.